right, we begin this hour with a revealing conversation with comedian, actor, and podcaster Marc Maron. His wildly successful podcast, WTF, is in its 14th year. And Maron recently released his first HBO special called Marc Maron, From Bleak to Dark. Maron says the best humor comes from real darkness. He spoke with Anthony Mason about turning his grief into comedy.
You first came here when?
I guess it would be 87.
Marc Maron launched his comedy career at the Comedy Store in L.A.
This is where I worked.
As the doorman.
So this is where I would be. Come on in, party one, come on in. Just wait here, just wait here.
Were you a tough doorman?
I thought I was.
And Mark, back to you.
Fame for the 59-year-old comic came late, and not as a comedian, but as a podcast host, and more recently, as an actor in series like Glow.
Debbie's the hero, and you're the villain. Everybody's gonna hate you.
Even with all the other things you do,
Yeah.
You're a stand-up comic at heart.
That's all, man. Comedy disarms things, and it protects you. There's a defensiveness involved in it, and I think it helps me survive.
I don't want to be negative, but I don't think anything's ever going to get better ever again.
Maron's dark humor is on display in his new HBO special.
And don't misunderstand me, I have no hope.
A recovering addict, now 23 years sober, Maron has never kicked his addiction to stand-up.
I was terrified all the time. I tell people that for however long it takes, about 80% of your energy goes into pretending you're not afraid. That for me went on for years.
So how did you keep going on?
Because I'm a compulsive weirdo. I felt like I was chosen to do this. I don't know why. Because there was never a plan B.
Until he got desperate. Plan B became the podcast he started in 2009, when his comedy career was on the rocks.
Because I was looking down the sort of the tunnel of being a kind of a headliner that didn't have a following. And that's a hard life, and it's a sad life.
This is Marc Maron. This is WTF with me.
WTF was what he calls a Hail Mary moment.
This was the article that sort of changed my life.
Early on, the New York Times praised the perceptive, prickly host and his ability to coax surprisingly revealing things from his guests.
And then cut to the arc to the president at my house, me and Obama.
In 2015, the 44th president came to Maron's garage studio.
This is where where I talk to the people.
Maron's moved since then, but his studio's still next to his house.
People who knew Obama was on, they're always like, was this where Obama was? I'm like, no, but it was that chair.
An unexpected success, the podcast was never meant to eclipse his comedy.
I think these are most of the notes for the new special. This is like, I'm trying to get it down to an hour, and I'm writing it on the Ham Yard Hotel stationery in London. It's a nice hotel, though.
I have a hard time when people my age say, aren't you a little old to still be mad at your parents? No.
In the HBO special, he covers his troubled relationship with his father.
My father's 84, recently diagnosed with dementia. We're all pretty excited.
I can really bust on my dad to his face in a very brutal way, and he just kills him. He loves it. He loves it.
And look, I know it's a terrible disease, and and at some point he's not going to know who I am anymore. I know that, and I also know on that day I will be truly free.
To what degree is making comedy out of it therapeutic?
I think it's therapeutic, but there's also an edge of cruelty to it. Yeah. So that's something you have to accept.
Talking about the death of his girlfriend, the director Lynn Shelton, was more difficult.
She did. She passed away, and it was the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm sure to her. And
you're talking about grief. It's just something people don't do because it's frightening, and they don't. There's a lot of reasons. It's complicated.
But the day after Shelton died suddenly of an undiagnosed blood cancer in May of 2020, Maron shared his grief on his podcast.
In the middle of the night, I heard her collapse in the hallway on her way to the bathroom, and I got up, and she was on the floor, and she couldn't move. I called the ambulance at around 5 in the morning on Friday, and by 12:45 a.m. Saturday. She was gone.
I thought it would help people to go on in that state. And it was awful. And I haven't listened to it.
Do you think you would?
No. It's sad, man. It was sad. And that's the thing. It's like, if I talk about it for a while, it's right there.
But slowly, it began to work its way into the comedy he was workshopping in clubs.
When you were working through that, how did you find audiences responded to it?
They were nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was not, I was not emotionally grounded.
And they weren't sure where you were going to go.
It wasn't where I was going to go. They weren't sure I was going to keep it together.
Sometimes he didn't.
And I would cry on stage.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to get out of it. But because of how I told you I write, I knew eventually I would have to make it funny because crying's not that entertaining.
Why was that relationship so special to you? Because you said you never felt anything like that before.
The reason it was so powerful is like I was terrified to give into it.
Why?
I don't know. It's just like because I'm emotionally not good, not right. But to answer your question, there's just nobody really like that person. Mm-hmm. Nobody like Lynn Shelton, and she actually, she just made me believe in myself.
Yeah. That's a big thing.
For me, it is.
How are you now?
I mean, I'm okay because I don't really, let myself go where I just went, 30 seconds ago. Mm-hmm. I don't mind opening up, like totally up there. I more so than in my life.
Why is that, do you think?
Because in some ways it's less risky.
Do you need it?
Probably. And I've never been happier doing it, and I don't think I've ever been better doing it. So there's a part of me that's sort of like, I think I'm finally enjoying this.
Thank you very much.
So interesting, right? He met Lynn Shelton on his podcast in 2015. She ended up directing him in one of her films. She directed 2 of his specials. It all developed from there. And he basically says, I wouldn't have a film career without her.
Wow.
So very important to him, obviously, you could tell.
I really appreciate him opening up the way that he does on stage and off stage. And I do think that it gives other people license to say it's okay to be vulnerable. It's very hard to be vulnerable and put yourself out there the way that he does.
Vulnerable and funny.
And
on stage in front of people.
Yeah.
He used a word I found really interesting.
I like him so much.
He said, you know what, I said, how did you develop this? Because he said, I don't write jokes. It's not what I do. I come up with ideas and then I go on stage and I kind of try to work them out. And he said, I almost kind of corner myself that I have to be funny to get out of this.
Wow.
And that's what he does.
He's so talented and so good. I mean, to be called a perceptive, prickly host, you don't think is going to be a good thing, but he is. He's also in that movie, To Leslie.
Yes, exactly.
He's really good in it.
He's very good.
Really
He's very good.
The New York Times calls him a perceptive, prickly host. He calls himself a compulsive weirdo.
I think we all are.
Marc Maron.
Could both be true?
Yeah, they can both be true, yeah. Anthony Mason, thank you very much.